Welcome back to Startup Health Now, the podcast where we celebrate the entrepreneurs and innovators who are transforming health. I'm Logan Plaster. Alzheimer's disease was first identified and described in 1906. In the century that followed, the disease has been marked primarily by sadness and, frankly, hopelessness. This terrible disease robs people of their memories and, by extension, their lives. It's a crushing weight for caregivers and families as well as they see their loved ones lose their identities. For nearly 100 years, there's been little to no progress in our ability to cure, slow, or even detect Alzheimer's disease. Not that people weren't trying. Behind the scenes, often laboring for decades without public notice, there has been an army of passionate innovators committed to turning this tide. Many, if not most, have had Alzheimer's touch their lives personally. In 2024, though, we believe that the tide is turning on Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. The health innovation community is leaping forward in its collective ability to detect Alzheimer's early through a range of biomarkers, slow its progression with pharmaceuticals and non-invasive devices, and there's even talks of a cure. In January, we launched an Alzheimer's Moonshot with support from Gates Ventures and the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation, aimed at rallying a committed community of Alzheimer's innovators at this critical moment. This week, we've publicly announced the first 14 companies to be invited into the Moonshot. They are amazing founders, and I encourage you to read about all of them on our blog and get to know them. To celebrate that announcement, I'm dedicating the next few podcasts to introducing you to members of our Alzheimer's Moonshot Impact Board. Led by Phyllis Farrell, who we've profiled on a previous episode, this is an interdisciplinary board that represents Alzheimer's experts from across the spectrum. This week, we're going to hear from Kristina Malzbender from the Life Sciences Division at Gates Ventures and a leader at the Diagnostics Accelerator. What I love about my conversation with Kristina is that while the feeling that Alzheimer's innovation is at a positive tipping point can sound a bit overly optimistic, she has the vantage point to put real concrete details behind it.
We suddenly have a couple of drugs approved or close to being approved. We have blood tests ready to hit prime time. Some are available and even more coming down the pipeline.
Once you've heard this interview, I encourage you to become part of Startup Health's extended Alzheimer's Moonshot community. There is a specific community of companies we've invited in and an amazing impact board, but we also need your participation. You can connect with these Alzheimer's innovators on LinkedIn and on our website and encourage their progress. You can add your voice to the conversation on social media at Startup Health. Tell us your stories. They add depth and humanity to all the great work being done, and they can be an encouragement for founders who find themselves facing a steep climb. With this Alzheimer's Moonshot, we're really all in this together. Now on to the interview. Kristina Malzbender, the Associate Director of Health and Life Sciences at Gates Ventures and a member of the Startup Health Alzheimer's Moonshot Impact Board. Thanks for taking a minute with me today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So the point of this interview is to get to know you a bit. We're doing a series on all the members of the Alzheimer's Impact Board. So let's just start with a little overview of your job there at Gates Ventures, what you do, and maybe some of the milestones that kind of got you to that role.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, I'm an associate director on the Health Life Sciences team at Gates Ventures, where I work on our Alzheimer's disease initiatives. And so my focus areas are primarily around Alzheimer's disease biomarkers and diagnostics, as well as clinical trials and some kind of overlap between the two. I've been with Gates Ventures for about 5 years now. I came from management consulting background and actually worked on some projects with Gates Ventures as my client before coming over here. And a big chunk of my work at GV has been working on the Diagnostics Accelerator, which is a fund that we have in partnership with the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation, or ADDF, which was set up in 2018 with this goal of funding companies and academic researchers developing novel biomarkers and diagnostics that are low cost and scalable, And so we've had that program up and running since 2018, and we funded a lot of really amazing science and technologies. But we've recognized a need for some more support for these founders and these companies in this space. And so that's kind of led us to this partnership with Startup Health.
When was sort of the genesis of your interest in Alzheimer's or aging, healthy longevity, these issues?
Yeah, back in my consulting days, I did a couple of different projects looking at basically launch strategy and forecasting for some of the big anti-amyloid Alzheimer's drugs that were in the pipeline at the time and have since come to market. And around the same time, actually, my grandfather was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and I was kind of watching my family provide as a caregiver and kind of navigate the healthcare systems. And so it was kind of the confluence of working on this issue, on working on Alzheimer's disease, both from a professional standpoint of kind of trying to understand the space, understand the challenges with regards to drug development, and why there had been no new drugs in over 20 years. And then at the same time, kind of observing that in real life with my family. And so all of that just came together. And since then, I've really doubled down and focused on this space. And it's been so rewarding, and I've learned a ton.
So when was that your grandfather was diagnosed?
That was around 2016, 2017.
Okay, okay. And are there some concrete ways that that's kind of shaped your actual work? Kind of, do you think you've looked differently at some of these opportunities because of that experience?
Um, I mean, absolutely. I think we always hear about how difficult it is for someone to get a diagnosis, and for
Mm,
how unclear it often is of if someone goes to their doctor with complaints of cognitive impairment or memory issues. Oftentimes that doesn't really translate into a concrete diagnosis of what is actually underlying their disease, and that is largely driven by this lack of good biomarkers for Alzheimer's disease. And so patients like my grandfather often end up going to their doctor, going through all of these cognitive tests, and end up with a very opaque diagnosis of cognitive impairment, but no understanding of what's causing that and what can really be done to address their symptoms and help improve their cognitive status. So
mm.
I think it's just kind of reinforced the need for better biomarkers and better diagnostics as just one piece of the puzzle for tackling Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah. Okay. So with your work at Gates Ventures and through the Diagnostics Accelerator, you're getting this ecosystem view of what's coming next. What's getting you the most excited in terms of the biomarker work, in terms of early detection? What are you excited about right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're right now at such a tipping point for the field as a whole, where we suddenly have a couple of drugs approved or close to being approved. We have blood tests ready to hit prime time. Some are available, and even more coming down the pipeline. And we have a lot of really good digital cognitive assessments that are able to reduce the burden on providers and make the process of assessing cognition much smoother. And so I think those three things combined, we're currently faced with the challenge of how do we actually get all of those advances that the field has made from a research standpoint and actually get them into clinical care and actually implement them. And so I
Mm.
think it's really exciting to have those three things all happen at once. But I think the challenge now is making sure that physicians are actually using those tools, and that they're getting reimbursed, and that patient care is actually being transformed with these new advances that have been made.
Talk to me a little bit more about those challenges and what you see as the unlocks. So, what are we bumping into here in terms of commercialization and actually bringing this great research to market?
Yeah, I think with the blood tests right now, we're still waiting on the first FDA approved IVD blood test to come to market. So right now we have some laboratory developed tests that are available, but there's some challenges with regards to the scalability of that. So I think once we get an FDA approved IVD blood test, that's going to be really transformational for just getting blood tests more widely used. I think in terms of the digital cognitive assessments, one challenge has just been the lack of consensus about which of those. There's tons of different tools available. A lot of them have different advantages over each other, lots of pros and cons. And so I think the field needs a little bit of help shaping consensus on what are the most useful cognitive assessments, and in which settings and which use cases. And then I think the therapeutics standpoint is just around accessibility and getting a better understanding of which patients are the best candidates for these new drugs, and which are most likely to respond. And that to me comes back to the biomarker issue.
It's interesting you mentioned this inflection point. What I'm hearing is it wasn't that long ago that early detection wasn't that helpful because we didn't have many ways to help somebody. And so there was like this sort of block in terms of, okay, well, we're not going to fund early detection if there's nothing we can do about it. And now
Mhm.
all of a sudden there's more we can do about it. And so that makes early detection
Yeah.
infinitely more valuable. So how do you see sort of those two streams coming together time wise?
That's a great point. I mean, I think the other thing is I'm optimistic that we'll kind of see a flywheel effect, because as we get more patients using these early detection tools, because there are drugs available to treat them, there's also going to be hopefully an off ramp of more of those patients that are getting identified going into the clinical trial pipeline and becoming participants and subjects in clinical trials, which right now is actually really challenging. There's, I think, around 99% of the people who could be eligible for an Alzheimer's clinical trials never, reach the front door of
Mm,
those trials. And so I think there's a really big opportunity to just kind of have the whole field of R&D have lift all boats by getting more patients identified early on, and getting those patients either onto a drug treatment or into clinical trials as
yeah.
an alternative.
I know your focus is more on diagnostics and biomarkers, but obviously you also have a heart, as we do, for the caregiver side of this equation, since your family has been there. Any thoughts on where we could see innovation on the caregiver side?
Hmm, that's a great question.
It's not straightforward. It's not clear how necessarily to help that community, but it sort of rounds out the picture, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a super underaddressed aspect of the field, actually. I think we're making so many advances in terms of patient care, but I do think kind of the caregivers have been left behind a little bit. I think just within the context of clinical trials, for example, a lot of clinical trials for Alzheimer's disease require a care partner to basically participate in the trial with them. And so the demands on the caregiver, on the family, are really high, especially in that research setting. So I think that's just one example of areas where we as a field can do more to think beyond just the individual patient and the whole ecosystem that supports them.
Yeah, it's a messy challenge. There's no pill, there's no perfect, solution that's going to cure, a massive workforce challenge, a massive sort of family burden challenge. So it's interesting to think of how much of an ecosystem of solutions will be required.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I would also point to some of there are a lot of organizations doing great work in that area. I think one in particular is Hilarity for Charity, Lauren Miller Rogan and Seth Rogen's group. So they have some really incredible respite programs and grants, specifically for caregivers, for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and dementia. So
Mm,
I think they're doing amazing work, but so much more needs to be done to
yeah.
help caregivers.
So let's talk about the Alzheimer's Impact Board. It's part of the reason why we're having this conversation. The real ethos behind it is collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. Bring together the right people on the Impact Board, bring together the right cohort of founders, get them to share information, to help one another on a day-to-day basis. Where do you see opportunities for collaboration within Alzheimer's innovation?
Um, well, I think just using the example of kind of the areas I've worked on for the last 5 years, just focused on companies that are in the diagnostics and biomarker space. I think there's really a huge opportunity to be unlocked here by facilitating collaboration between them and some of the really great therapeutics companies that are in the ecosystem. And so directly making that link, I think, will be really beneficial for both types of companies. I think the biomarker folks can benefit from getting involved in clinical trials for drugs and gathering more data, and vice versa. I think these companies developing drugs, obviously, if they have better biomarkers, that's going to help them better identify earlier on, hopefully, whether these pipeline drugs are effective or not.
If through this impact board you could wave a magic wand and get two or three businesses around a table together to workshop a solution, who might you want to bring together, or what type of business?
Um, hmm.
I know it's a tough one. I'm throwing that one
Yeah.
at you.
I think if we can combine the efforts that are being made by these companies developing blood tests, companies developing digital cognitive assessments, and companies developing novel therapeutics, and get them together to think about some of these implementation challenges that I mentioned
Mm,
earlier, I think that would be hugely impactful, because I think all of these companies, all of these groups are trying to tackle how do they get their own solution into market, and one piece of the puzzle. But I think this is really a comprehensive, like, we perhaps need to redefine the whole patient care workflow for how patients
yeah,
diagnosed,
that's
treated, what treatment options are available. And so I think a lot can be done by having all of those folks work together towards implementation.
it. Hearing you say that, it feels like that is the theme in many ways of this cohort, of this community. Everyone's got their amazing product, but strategic implementation together, rethinking the workflow is something that has to be done together. And is perhaps the unlock to really bring this to people. It's like you have to actually get it into their lives, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What are you most excited about accomplishing through being on this impact board, representing Gates Ventures and working with these founders?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think it's just providing this community around helping support the founders and the companies that are trying to tackle this issue, and make really amazing products and companies in this space. We've known for the last 5 years, just through the Diagnostics Accelerator, what a high need there is in terms of, helping these companies fundraise and helping them find product market fit and identify their target customers and their best go-to-market plan. And so we talk to a lot of scientific founders with amazing technologies, and I think building this community through the Alzheimer's Moonshot will just help them kind of round out how they actually bring those scientific advances out of the lab and then actually into the marketplace.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of the things that we deal with are sort of the intangibles, the mindsets necessary for a founder to achieve and to scale. You're talking about these brilliant people, these researchers that have maybe the solution, but need to still be helped over that valley of death as they commercialize. What do you, as you look at founders, you look at companies, what are some of the intangibles that you look for in a founder or in a startup that like lets you know that this group has what it takes to kind of be in it for the long haul?
Yeah, I would say two big things. One is a focus on mission, so they're super clear on what they want to accomplish, what their niche is within the Alzheimer's patient journey, how they're addressing it. And then two is that they're adaptable and resilient, and that
Mm,
they can, if they're faced with a challenge, that they're going to find a way around it or over it. And that, it's, as we know, this is an incredibly difficult field, from a scientific standpoint, from a commercial standpoint. And so it's not going to be easy. And I think having that resilience, but also then being able to focus back on that mission, will help companies be successful.
Now, just to push on that, I agree with you, but you didn't say like smartest team, most money. You said, having that mission first. Why is that a must-have versus a nice to have?
I think if you can really clearly articulate that mission and you have that focus front of mind, then you're going to be more successful fundraising and hiring the right team. And I think other things will fall into place as long as you have that really clearly articulated mission, and that is explicitly your focus throughout all of your activities. And I think where folks run into trouble is if they deviate from that mission, or they pivot too much or too quickly and lose sight of where they originally started out. Then I think it's more challenging to go talk to investors consistently and get them to continue to support you. It's more challenging to find the right hires that believe in what you're trying to do.
Is there anything that you would like for folks to know about the health and life sciences group at Gates Ventures, kind of the bigger picture of the work that you're doing there?
Um, I think I would just emphasize that as the private office of Bill Gates, one thing we try to do is just identify what are areas that are not necessarily being addressed effectively by other sectors of the funder community or of the field. So, for example, funding basic sciences, we think the remit of the NIH, and they do incredible work there. And pharma and biotech is really, pushing forward drug development. And so we're trying to look at, where is the field being left behind and what are the gaps? And so that's part of the reason why diagnostics and biomarkers, for example, has been a focus for us. And so I think I would put it in the context of that we are always trying to collaborate with nonprofits like the ADDF and patient advocacy groups like the Alzheimer's Association and pharma and biotech companies. But at the end of the day, we're trying to kind of fill any unmet needs that from the broader ecosystem.
Let's close with a really sort of personal note of how you want to see the world different in 2 to 5 years for folks like your grandfather, other people's grandparents or parents, because of this work that you're doing, not just at Gates Ventures, but on this impact board. How do you want some specific elements of how these folks go through this disease to be concretely different?
Yeah, there's so many ways, but I think the way I envision like the patient journey in 5 years, for example, is maybe someone initially notices that they have some cognitive issues or they're noticing memory decline. They can go to their doctor and or even on their own, they can just through their phone, through their iPad, they can go download some sort of digital cognitive assessment and within 5 minutes get a quick read on if there's any issues or not. And based on that information, they can bring that to their primary care doctor, talk about what they've noticed, anything else going on with their health, and then they can get a blood test ordered. And so along with the rest of their blood panel and their annual wellness visit, they'll also get an Alzheimer's disease blood test. And then within a few days, that'll come back and give them a sense of whether or not the symptoms that they were observing might be related to Alzheimer's disease pathology or not. And then go from there to hopefully getting a drug and getting it paid for by their insurance and being able to improve and extend the quality of their life.
Yeah, I love it. Kristina, I hope that vision comes to life, through your work there at Gates Ventures and through the impact board of the Alzheimer's Moonshot. I appreciate you leaning in on this and spending your valuable time, your valuable work time, supporting these companies doing this work. So I appreciate you.
Awesome. Appreciate you.
All right. We'll check back in at some point and understand maybe how the first 6 to 12 months of work on the Alzheimer's Moonshot's going. But I appreciate you being here. Hope you have a great week.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Startup Health Now. We'll be back again with another episode next week.